Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. A millionaire was looking for a woman for a day, but found one with a month to live. Ethan Walker, 42, wasn't just a wealthy man. He was a business legend. The founder of Neuralinks, a technology company specializing in medical artificial intelligence, he had revolutionized the way hospitals access diagnostics and patient data. He was often called a visionary, a cold genius, and sometimes a modern-day misanthrope. He didn't like these labels, but he didn't do anything to contradict them either. In his glass-enclosed penthouse overlooking Central Park, Ethan stood alone in front of his wardrobe on this Friday evening, absent-mindedly pulling a black shirt onto a hanger. The charity gala organized by the Whitman Foundation, of which he was a principal patron, would bring together all of New York. Influential CEOs, polished politicians, celebrities engaged for the sake of appearances. Everyone would come to parade under the flashbulbs, with fixed smiles and calculating stares. A social circus he endured only out of duty. He slipped his white gold watch onto his left wrist, adjusted it, then looked at himself in the mirror. Impeccable suit. Hard gaze. Empty in the depths of his eyes. A memory resurfaced. Olivia. The only woman he'd ever loved. 8 years earlier, she'd left him on the eve of their wedding. Unable to bear his growing coldness, his obsession with control, his refusal to accept his fragility. He'd never blamed her. He'd realized too late that in his quest for success, he'd forgotten to love, to open up, to give. Since then, he'd known only one-night stands, companions who were never called twice. And tonight, he refused to appear alone. He could no longer bear the questions disguised as compassion. Still single, Ethan? You seem to be too demanding. He let out a sharp sigh and went to grab his phone. He quickly typed a message to a discreet contact at a luxury escort agency. I'm looking for a companion for tonight. No intimacy, just a suitable presence. Criteria: elegant, cultured, very discreet. No drama. Unlimited budget. He sent the message. A few minutes later, a reply appeared on his screen. I might have just what you need. Claire Mitchell, 34 years old. Former art teacher. Discreet, independent, refined. She accepted. Ethan frowned slightly. The name meant nothing to him. But he didn't care. He wasn't trying to be emotional. He just wanted to fill an empty chair next to hers, to avoid the awkward silences and the pointed stares. He finished buttoning his shirt, ran a hand through his slightly graying brown hair, then left his apartment in silence, unaware that this simple decision, born of detachment, would overturn everything he thought he understood about the word live. On the night of the gala, the Plaza Hotel was bathed in golden light, its crystal chandeliers casting sparkling shards over the red carpets and sumptuous gowns. The hushed murmurs of conversation, the clinking of champagne glasses, and peals of mock laughter composed a social symphony Ethan knew all too well. The guests filed past, impeccably dressed, flashing studied smiles, seeking to impress or be noticed. But that evening, amidst this crowd of flamboyant silhouettes and polished masks, a woman made a discreet entrance that irresistibly caught Ethan's eye. Claire Mitchell walked with a natural, almost modest elegance. Her midnight blue dress, simple but perfectly cut, fell in a light drape that accentuated her figure without ever screaming luxury. Her hazel eyes, deep and attentive, seemed to capture every nuance of the room, every emotion invisible at first glance. There was an absence of pretension in her bearing that contrasted sharply with the usual exuberance of such events. She didn't seek to dominate the conversation or attract the spotlight. On the contrary, she gracefully withdrew, giving more value to what she heard than to what she said. As she approached him, Ethan was struck by the serenity she exuded, a calm rare in this world of artifice and pretense. The kind of calm that doesn't shy away from the gaze, but embraces it unwaveringly. Throughout the evening, Claire truly listened to him, not just with polite nods, but with a genuine presence. Her questions were accurate, precise, never intrusive. She asked the right questions, the ones that awakened a forgotten spark in Ethan, a part of himself he'd hidden for too long. When his dry, almost cynical humor showed, she didn't look away, didn't mock him. She laughed softly, at the right moment, with a lightness that broke down the last barriers he had erected around himself. Time seemed to stretch out. Hours passed without boredom disturbing the bubble they had created in the midst of the tumult. As the evening drew to a close, as the guests began to disperse, Ethan found himself feeling a mixture of envy and astonishment. "Do you want to go get some coffee?" he suggested, without really knowing why. Claire looked at him, a flash of surprise in her eyes, then nodded, a slight smile on her lips. "Yes, I would like that." They left the ballroom together, walking into the New York night, unaware that this simple invitation marked the beginning of an encounter that would change their lives. In the days that followed, Ethan and Claire saw each other with a regularity neither had planned, but both expected. These weren't formal dates, nor a rushed romance. Rather, they were a sweet and rare interlude, a space where each could exist without expectation. They met in simple places: a park in Soho to eat vanilla ice cream, a hidden bookstore in the East Village where Claire spent hours touching the worn covers. They shared silences that weren't heavy, but full. Silences that said, "I'm happy here with you, and I have nothing to prove." Ethan surprised himself. He, who had learned to hide his emotions behind lectures, contracts, and figures, was gradually letting himself be disarmed by Claire's sincerity. She listened to him without ever seeking to advise him. She spoke to him about her childhood memories without trying to impress, and she always laughed from the heart. But despite her tranquil light, he sometimes perceived a veiled sparkle in her eyes. An absence, fleeting but real. A melancholy contained behind her smiles, like a sad note in a joyful melody. He didn't dare ask questions yet. Until that evening. They were sitting in a small Brooklyn cafe, at a table by the window. Outside, the city was slowly drifting off into a light drizzle. Claire held a mug in her hands, as if seeking some warmth. She looked at Ethan for a long time, as if assessing a risk she was about to take. Then she spoke, softly, without pathos. "I have to tell you something." Ethan looked up, feeling like the next words would change the very texture of what they were experiencing. "I've been battling cancer for a year. It's terminal. The doctors give me a month, maybe two." She paused. Her voice barely trembled. She placed her hand on his. It was light, almost cold, but the pressure was firm, determined. "I never lied to you, but I didn't tell you everything. Because deep down, I just wanted to live a little normally. To feel alive. And you give me that. Without knowing it." Ethan felt his breath catch. A cold wave passed through his chest. He looked at Claire, this woman he was silently learning to love, and suddenly felt terribly powerless. He was used to controlling everything, to fixing everything with money or quick decisions. But now nothing. And yet, he didn't leave. He didn't step back. He didn't take her hand and say the usual phrases. He looked into her eyes, and simply, he said, "So let's live." From that evening on, every day counted differently. They made a list together, scribbled in a notebook that they called Little Miracles, nothing extravagant. No skydiving or luxury cruises. Just simple, essential, forgotten things. See a sunset in Montauk, lying on a blanket, in silence. A fresco on the wall of Claire's apartment, without worry about the result. Listening to an old Nina Simone vinyl while drinking tea at Jasmine. Write letters to loved ones, to say what has never been said. Eating a whole pizza by hand in an alley in Little Italy. Laughing until you cry while playing a stupid board game. Sleeping against each other in the middle of the day, without pressure. Ethan postponed meetings. He turned down deals. His partners panicked, but he listened to no one. He was there, fully. For Claire. For himself. For what remained of time. Claire taught him what money couldn't buy. Slowness. Silence. The courage to say "I love you" without expectation. The right to cry without shame. And above all, the art of living intensely, even under the imminent shadow of the end. The day came, inevitably, slowly, like a tide you see coming, but can't stop. Claire had asked to stay at home, in her small Brooklyn apartment, rather than in a blank hospital room. She wanted her final moments to be surrounded by the things that made her come alive. Her paintbrushes, her books, her childhood photos, the letters she wrote to loved ones, and Ethan's hand. The curtains were half drawn, letting in a soft autumn light. The room smelled of lavender and warm wood. A Nina Simone record played in the background, her raspy voice cradling the silences between heartbeats. Ethan lay against her, his arm around her shoulders, his fingers intertwined with hers. He could feel her breathing becoming more fragile, more spaced out. But she wasn't trembling. She wasn't afraid. She was smiling. "Thank you for giving me more than one day, Ethan," she whispered. His voice was a breath, but every word was clear. "You gave me a whole life. A sweet, beautiful life. A life where I was loved." Ethan felt a tear roll down his cheek, silent. He said nothing. He kissed her forehead, closed his eyes, and stayed that way until her breathing slowly stopped. After she left, a new silence fell over Ethan's life. A silence unlike the one he knew before her. It was no longer emptiness, but an invisible presence. An imprint. In the following weeks, he refused to immediately return to his post. Instead, he searched every letter Claire had left, every drawing she had left in their notebooks, every memory. And in this shared memory, he found a meaning he had never known before. A few months later, he founded the Claire Mitchell Foundation in her honor. It wasn't just a tribute, it was a mission. The foundation's goal was to create end-of-life spaces where beauty, privacy, and dignity would be prioritized. Places where terminally ill people could paint, write, laugh, and love. Where they could, like Claire, live until their last breath. The foundation quickly grew. Artists, doctors, volunteers, and psychologists came to offer their help. Houses were built, not hospitals. Gardens, art studios, and libraries were established. Musicians were invited to play for the patients. The last days were given the same importance as the first. Ethan, however, was never the same man again. Claire's experience had opened a chink in his armor. A chink through which entered a light he would never extinguish again. He no longer tried to fill his life with numbers. He no longer sought to avoid pain. He welcomed. He loved. He cried, sometimes, watching the sunset in Montauk, alone, or with a resident of the foundation, but always with gratitude. Every year, on the day they met, Ethan would throw a gala. Not a high society gala. A lively gala. The room was decorated with Claire's paintings. Her letters were read aloud. Children played the violin. Guest patients spoke. People laughed, cried, and sang. And at each gala, Ethan would go on stage, still in costume, but with a more tender look. She taught me that even a life of 34 years can contain 1,000, if it is loved. Claire showed me that what is essential cannot be bought. It must be given, and that it never truly dies. So we raised our glasses, and we celebrated not the end, but the beauty of what we had.